tonight's session. And so folks will be able to access this, if not in real time, sort of afterwards as a recording and as a resource. But yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. I'm so excited to be sharing some knowledge and sharing, on this workshop that we're about to do. And so without any further ado, we're going to jump right in. I'm going to share my screen here. We have a slideshow that's prepared, and we're just going to jump right in. So hang on just in a second. You will be able to see the presentation that we have for everyone today. Let's see right here. And hang on. There we go. All right, so perfect. So, again, good evening, welcome. So Shori Clark, you're here, and we might be having a couple folks joining afterwards, but not to worry. We're gonna join right in and get started. So just to start, I think it's really good to begin with some brief introductions. So, and then we can sort of talk a little bit about what our time today will be spent doing. So again, my name is Joel Reed. I am a dad. I'm a husband. I actually have two little ones, ages 2 and 1, and actually another baby on the way. So it's a super excited time for our family. I'm a guitarist. I love music. Music is something I'm really passionate about. I've been playing music for about, I think it's about 11 or 12 years now, in terms of my guitar work. I'm also the founder and executive director of SoundCheck Youth Arts. So we are a youth agency that specializes in providing a variety of youth mentorship and music programs. And we've been at this from really, we began this work in 2013. Um, Joining me today and sort of as a co-facilitator is my wife, Cheyenne Reed. I'll let her sort of do her introduction and get started. And then we can go from there. So take it away, sweetheart.
Hey everyone, my name is Cheyenne Reed. I'm a mother, wife, a co-founder of SoundCheck Youth Arts. I'm also I'm a past executive director for another Toronto charity. Um, and yeah, I've been writing grants since the inception of SoundCheck. Really, that's when I really got into it. Um, and yeah, that's about it. That's everything about me.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you here, and we hope you get the most out of this workshop.
And Shori, since you're here, do you mind just a brief introduction? Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you a musician? Do you play anything? Are you interested in learning grants? Why don't you just give us a brief introduction since we have you here? Hey, are you hearing us? Not sure if your mic's muted or okay, so maybe there's some technical things there. Yeah, if we're just sort of gonna go onward and forward, and so here we go. We'll dive in. Hopefully, you're tuning in, and if you do have any questions, maybe I'm not sure if there might be an audio issue. There is actually the chat box as well, so please do feel free to ask any questions you may have. Leave it there, pop it there in the chat box, and we will go from there. So yeah, just to talk a little bit about today and what we'll be doing. Um, let's get our slide here. So our agenda, in terms of our agenda for today, so there's sort of a couple things that we're going to be talking about. So first, you kind of heard a little bit about myself and Shay, and sort of we'll get a little bit deeper into our journey, what brought us together and what brought us into writing grants. How did we get to where we are right now? So brief introduction about SoundCheck, a little bit more in depth, and then we're going to dive right in. So number two, what is a grant? We're going to be actually debunking some myths that's out there about grant writing. So this is going to be really, we're trying to be really relatable in terms of how we, explore some of these topics. Number four, then we're just going to dive right in. So that's the plug. That's where you get to hear and everything you need to know about grants, the to dos, the what not to dos, all the information, all the insights, the details. We're going to get right in there. And lastly, we have some grant opportunities that we'll be sharing as well. And then, of course, at the end, we have some time for some questions and answers. We'll see how it goes depending on how things go on with this. All right. So just in terms of some objectives for today, firstly, we just hope that this session will help folks gain knowledge, insights, and tools that will help you become a better at grant writing. I know for me as a musician, writing grants was something that I've never done before. If you were to fast forward back to 2013, when this all sort of began for us, it was something that was brand new. It was something that I've never done before. My wife can testify to that as well. And in terms of the second point that we have here, so increased funding opportunities and how to access them. That's something that we want folks to be able to gain from this workshop. And lastly, again, just demystifying the subject, allowing grants to be something that hopefully folks can relate to, etc. Um, we'll sort of just go on. We won't spend too much time on the protocols and stuff. We don't have that many people on right now. But if we need to come back to do some housekeeping, we'll do that. But just sort of general, Zoom meeting protocol, sort of if you have a question or anything like that, just definitely use the group chat, and we will definitely get to you. All right, so jumping right in. So just quickly about SoundCheck. So we are, as I mentioned, we're a grassroots organization. We started as a project in 2013, and so this first image that you see here is actually the church that we began our very first programs back in 2013. And this was a really amazing place for us. It brings back very fond memories just because of how we all, this is where it all started for us. So flashback to 2013. At the time, Shan and I were not married. We actually met working at a community center in the area by the name of Frontlines. I don't know if anyone has heard of it. But anyway, we've met it at Frontlines. And at the time, we were both working there, just working in community, doing a variety of different programs for the young people. And then, at one point, we had an opportunity, the opportunity presented itself with this grant, our first grant ever. We'll never forget. It was called the Identify and Impact Grant. And this was a grant that was put forward by the City of Toronto. It's actually a grant that's still around today, which is something that's really amazing. And what was great about this was it was an opportunity for us to take an idea, take one small idea, and turn it into action, turn it into something that we can actually realize. And so at the time we were friends, and we came together, Shay and I, another member of our board who's currently sitting on our board, and we thought about what we could do when we saw the grant opportunity. And of course, being musicians that we were, myself, being a guitarist, Shay actually being a singer, the other member of our team also being a musician, quickly it was very easy and very quick to understand what we should do. We have to do some kind of a music program. And so, long story short, we started really humble beginnings. We had through some partnerships. We were at this local church, as I mentioned. We were doing our programs in the basement for about 5 years, and it was quite a journey. Living basically the program at that time, we were just a project and not even really an organization. And fast forward some years. So if you see this photo here, right below then and now, we have a space that's located at 1122 Castlefield Avenue. And really, thanks to the support of the Ontario Trillium Foundation, a youth opportunities fund, we opened Toronto's first ever youth-led musician community center. And so this is we were really amazed and still to this day, just really thankful for how the journey has been, coming from a really small project without space, without instruments, without the ability to sort of sustain our work, being complete novices to grant writing, to this day, working full time for the organization, learning, learning a lot about grant writing and even ultimately getting a grant that's sort of funding all of our operations to this day. So in terms of scope, so you can kind of understand where we've come from, we're talking about like our first grant being, $10,000 that we applied for and were able to get, and sort of, grants today that can be upward to six figures. And so truly there's been a lot of growth over the years. Basically, what we do is we provide youth with a safe space to explore their musical creativity and express their artistic identities. Particularly, we serve Black youth and musicians, and we help them collaborate, access instruments, and receive mentorship. So, one of the things that was really cool about our space prior to actually the whole, the pandemic that we're currently all in, we were operating a drop-in center, and folks were able to come on site, access instruments, recording equipment, etc. Since post-COVID, we've sort of transitioned and are doing a number of online programs as well as supports like this one. So just we mentioned some of the programs that we're offering. One of the ones that's currently running in case folks might be interested. So there's a current program that's running called Power to Play. This is a free workshop. It happens weekly on Mondays. And actually, if anyone's interested in learning, receiving free guitar, bass, drums, and piano lessons, this is the program for you. What we do is we actually work with young musician mentors. So these are young people, very much so like yourself, who are musicians, professionals in their own right, have an extreme amount of talent and professional experience, be it touring experience, production experience, etc. Production experience, touring experience, etc. And yeah, they're here to share knowledge, and it's open. One of the great things about this program is it's actually open to beginners as well. So, firstly, uh, first question or first thing to look at here is just sort of what is a grant? And actually, I'll let Shay sort of dive in here in terms of what is a grant. And so we got this slide here. Are you hearing Shay? You able to talk?
Just give me 1 second.
Okay, I think she's having a bit of a technical thing. Shay, you know what? You work that out, and I'll sort of just press ahead here. All right. So first question that we ask is sort of what is a grant? And so what we have here, what is a grant? Ultimately, a grant is free money. That's what a grant is. It's free money. It's an opportunity for you to realize an idea, take some kind of a thought, take some kind of an idea that you might have had, and actually bring it into action. So, in terms of what is a grant is literally free money. And how to use, and I add this as a caveat just so folks can really understand the scope of what this is all about. It's free money, yes, it's out there. However, it is supposed to be utilized for a specific purpose and to achieve specific goals and outcomes. All right. And so, hey, Eric, I can see you just joined us not so long ago. Are you hearing us okay on your side? Maybe say something in the chat if you are. We'll sort of proceed onwards. I'm not sure if you're having any audio issues, but this is actually being recorded, so don't worry. It will be posted, and folks will be able to access this with all the resources that we have for today. So, as I mentioned, a grant is free money to be utilized for a specific purpose to achieve specific goals and outcomes. And I don't know if folks are able to hear, or maybe you can do me a favor and type in the group chat, how familiar are you with grants? On a scale from 1 to 10, if you can let me know by typing that out in the group chat, that would be really helpful, because that way I can know, if you are sort of experienced, if this might be your first time, learning about grants, etc. And so we can actually tailor a lot of our conversation today to where you're at. So again, if you're hearing me, and you're in the group chat, please just leave a message or write from 1 to 10 what your experience is with grants. 10 being, Joel, I'm an expert. I completely understand grants. I'm very good at them. I've been awarded multiple grants over time. And 1 being, Joel, this is actually my first time really learning about grants, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more. All right, so we talked about what a grant is. It's ultimately free money. So the question is, how do we get them? How do we get them? How can we access this? How do I get this? And so, in typically what you're going to find out with any grant for that matter, there's almost always, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say always, some kind of an application process. And so we're going to get into a little bit more about the nitty gritty of the grant. But just so folks are sort of aware and grounded, yes, it's free money, but like anything else in the world, my parents used to always teach me, my father, my mom would always say, hey, nothing in the world's free. And truly, it does take some work on our end to be able to access and some of these resources. But it is an opportunity. And I hope after today, folks will be a lot more aware of how they might be able to access some of these opportunities. So again, there usually is an application process that's involved. In terms of what that process looks like, almost always there's some kind of a review panel and some kind of review committee. And just what that means is that usually sometimes folks may not be aware. It's not actually one person usually that is reviewing any one particular application. There's usually a panel that's involved. And so that also usually helps to create a more transparent process. And just so folks are aware, because sometimes, there might be a temptation if, let's say, you did a grant and maybe you didn't get it. It's sort of like, who's to blame here? Like, who can I talk to? And usually it just works a little bit different like that. It's usually a committee that makes the decisions. And we'll talk a little bit more about the competitive nature of the process, because it is sometimes very competitive. All right. Uh, so our next slide here. So I'll let Shay. Is your audio okay here? You want to jump in?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Are folks able to hear? Are folks hearing Shay? Can thumbs up? I think we're okay, Shay.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so there are some myths about grants, and a lot of times these myths kind of keep people back from jumping into an application or even seeking out, viable applications that they would be potentially able to receive. So we're just going to go over some myths about the grants. If you guys have any other ones that you'd like to share, you can also add in the chat. So first one that we kind of remember experiencing was there are no grants out there for me. So sometimes, and this is a confidence thing, which we'll go over more about later, but sometimes the roadblock could just be ourselves. We probably don't really understand how to market what we're doing, or we don't know how to clearly articulate in words or writing the value of what we're doing. And that is completely a myth. With enough research and time put into it, you'll definitely find out that there are grants out there for you and what you do.
Awesome.
So the next one, you need to be a professional grant writer to get a grant. So for sure, this is something that I, for years, thought, and this held me back in terms of applying for grants, because I'm like, it's an actual job. People actually get paid to do grants, and there was always this like feeling around it, like, oh, you just have to know what to say. Like there's certain words you have to use, and that is completely a myth. I think every grant is different. Of course, there is grant lingo, quote unquote, if you'd like to say that, but there's no real, formula as to how to write a grant necessarily. And we'll get more into that later. It's pretty simple. So I would say you don't have to be a professional grant writer to get a grant. Next one, I wrote a grant once and I didn't get it, so I must not be good at grant writing. This is a huge one because, as anyone, I mean, we can all agree if we have that thing where when we're turned down, we get hurt, and sometimes we're kind of like nervous about putting ourselves out there again. For me, I know that writing a grant is like putting myself on paper, and to be transparent, sometimes that can be very nerve-wracking because like you're writing about yourself, and to have someone turn down your ideas and your passion, it can be a bit traumatizing to say the least. So I do think that is a myth though. Just because you got turned down once doesn't mean that you're not good at writing grants, and it doesn't mean that your idea is not strong. Next thing, you need connections on the inside to get a grant. So you don't necessarily need connections on the inside to get a grant. However, it is good to build connections with people who are on the other end, just so that they can remember your application. They can also give you good insight. So whereas you don't need it necessarily, it's a benefit to have. Another one, getting a grant is too hard. Definitely a myth. I hope by the end of tonight's session, you'll feel more comfortable applying for grants, and you'll understand that it's really not that bad once you know how to approach it, and once you know how to really hone in on your gifts and on the value of what you're able to share. So the next one, you need to be really established to get a grant. For sure, this is not true. As Joel mentioned earlier on in the presentation, we started our project and launched it by getting our first grant. And this was without having any previous grant experience. And a lot of grant opportunities that are out there for young people acknowledge the fact that you're just starting out. So you do not have to be established to get a grant. And you need to start somewhere. So be aware of that when you're looking out there, and just choose the right grant for you. So here are things to believe. For sure, opportunities are out there. You have to do that research though, and you need to secure that bag. Okay, so you can't be nervous. You got to know that you're good. You got to know that you have something to offer, and secure that bag. Okay. Next, grants are competitive but not impossible to get. So when we're writing our grants, we need to keep in mind that there are going to be a lot of other people sending in their applications. And that means that when you're putting in your application, you need to put time into it, lots of thought. You need to be thorough. You need to be confident in who you are and what you're planning to present, and know that it's not impossible. So once you believe that I can achieve this, it's easier for you to answer the questions and go through the process. Also, lastly, persistence and learning from mistakes is key. So why we're saying this is because a lot of times with grants, some funders, not all, but some funders will offer some feedback for unsuccessful applicants. And that feedback is always very valuable. I would suggest that if there's ever a chance for you to reach out to your funder and ask them, what could I have done better? Where did I fall short? Please do that, and they'll be willing and able to give you information as to how you can do better for next time.
Awesome, Shay. Thanks for that. I just want to make sure, folks, are we hearing this? Are we getting anything out of this? Are folks we're following? Awesome, awesome, awesome. Good stuff. So, before we move on, I just want to open it up. Does anyone have any other myths that they've heard about grant writing before we sort of move on?
You can put it in the chat.
I see some folks on. Do you guys have anything to say before we move on in terms of this? Okay, cool, cool, cool. Bless. Anyone else? All right, cool. So we're moving on. All right, y'all. So this next slide is really important. So we just busted open some myths so everyone should be aware of what to believe and what not to believe, right? So now as we move on in the presentation, we got some cool things to share, right? A big question that we get, I know this was for us when we were starting out, is who exactly are these funders? You know what I mean? Like who are these people? Like who are they? Where do they come from? What grants? Like what is this? If you're like me, that was my first thoughts. Like what's going on? Like who are these people? Who what? They're gonna read my stuff. Like what? Right? I understand all of those thoughts because at the end of the day, I had to start there and I had to start somewhere. So in terms of who funders are, big myth. We didn't really talk about this, but it's a myth. Some people think all funders are government agencies. I don't know, folks. Raise, have you guys ever heard that? Like all funders are government? Not true. Not true. Some funders actually happen to be different businesses, corporations. Some funders are corporations. Some funders actually happen to be foundations or philanthropic organizations. So like organizations that do philanthropy, so like there's a lot of different kinds of funders out there. They're not all government, although government funding and government funders are very prevalent in the space, you'll find. And usually, in terms of government funding, it's broken down into things like municipal funding sources, provincial funding sources, and federal sources. So that's something that's really important to understand. Secondly, another thing that's really important to understand on that same note is that sometimes there are agencies of the government. So, for example, a really popular one, if in fact, I think it's the largest funding agency in all of North America, is called the Ontario Trillium Foundation. And so they are literally the largest funder in all of North America, and they happen to be an agency of the Ontario, the federal, sorry, the provincial government, the Ontario provincial government. All right. So who are these funders? We talked a little bit about who they are. So now a big question is honestly, okay, I hear who they are, but like, what do they want? What is a grant? What do they want? What do I have to do? So this is where it gets really important, right? In every single grant that I've come across, there's always going to be some kind of eligibility guidelines section, some kind of eligibility, some kind of guidelines where they're literally asking you or telling you this is what we are looking for. So that is so important because when you want anything to do with finding out about grants, that's where you have to start. Look at the eligibility. Is this a grant and look at what funders are looking for. Because as I mentioned, because these are all these different agencies, government bodies, corporations, uh, some nonprofits do offer grants, etc. Because there's all these different organizations and people or groups offering funding, they often have very different objectives. And it's wrong to assume that they all just want the same thing. So it's very important to start by looking at the eligibility criteria. We're going to talk more about that, and it's going to be a reoccurring theme, but it's so important. Is this a grant, for example, that's for youth, right? Is this a grant that's for people of color, indigenous people? Is this a grant that's specifically for black people? Is this a grant that's for women, etc.? So there's so many different kinds of grants that are out there, and it's important to understand that each funder is going to have different eligibility in terms of who they're looking to fund. And so do yourself a favor and check out the eligibility and guidelines first. All right. Next thing, uh, and really, it's literally, I wrote this out, and I remember when I was preparing this, I wrote it out 3 times for emphasis. The next thing I'm going to say again is they tell you what they are looking for in the eligibility guidelines and section of the grant. So check it out. I'm going to say it one more time for emphasis. The thing you really need to pay attention to is what they're looking to fund. Check out the eligibility and check out whether or not you are eligible and if that applies to you. I say it 3 times for emphasis. All right, moving on.
Yeah, so I just want to add, um, sometimes when another myth that we didn't mention was like you have to go into this and just shoot for the stars and hope that you land somewhere. It's not true. They literally tell you what they're looking for. They tell you how to, make sure that this grant is right for you. They say, okay, here's what we fund. What category do you fall under? So it's actually kind of think of it like an essay or a test, and your teacher gave you the cheat sheet, or your teacher gave you the rubric or the study questions. It's pretty much what it is. So the eligibility, sorry, the guidelines section of each grant is very important. Really, really, really important. I'll add it 4 times there. Really, really, really important.
Awesome. Thank you for that, sweetheart. All right, so moving on. We're going right ahead. Um, Here are 3 tips. I want you guys, I don't know if you guys are taking notes. Don't worry, we're going to send this out to everyone. As long as you had registered, everyone's going to be able to receive a copy of this afterwards. So don't worry about too much about the notes. But there are 3 key things that we want to give you as pointers for engaging funders. Number one, we already talked about. I won't emphasize it again, although it's really important. Thoroughly review the eligibility criteria, right? But number two is attend the information session. People, these funders a lot of time are having information sessions where they are literally explaining to you and to anyone that wants to listen exactly what this is all about. And so why not, if you're interested, if you find a grant, you come across a grant, we have some that we'll be sharing in terms of opportunities towards the end. But if you come across a grant, why not attend the information session and hear from their in their own words exactly what they're looking for? And guess what? Remember one of the myths that we mentioned? Okay, yeah, you don't really need someone on the inside to get a grant, but man, does it help to at least know somebody that is looking out for you? You know what I mean? Like, show up to the information session, make yourself known, introduce yourself, run some ideas by some of the people that are talking. Say, hey, what's going on? This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm interested in. Be known to people. You know what I mean? It's like about networking, right? And so I'm not saying that doing that is going to mean you're going to get a grant. Don't get me wrong. I'm simply saying that a lot of it is about building connections and making connections. It's worth having someone on the inside. As I mentioned, it's a panel that's ultimately going to decide, but it's worth having someone on the inside that's going to look out for you and say, I'll tell you guys a quick story. Just over the years of building relationships with different funders and stuff, I remember one time a grant deadline was coming up and we didn't actually hit the submit as yet. I think we were like, it was cutting close. This was like we were minutes away, or I think, or close, really close to the deadline, right? And so one of the funders, like one of the program managers, we're going to talk more about that, about them. One of the program managers hit us up and said, "Hey, I haven't seen your application. Are you guys okay? Like, is everything cool? Like, you know what I mean?" And like, it may not seem like a big thing, but like that tells you that, yo, there's somebody out there that cares. Like, you know what I mean? And that's worth having. You know what I mean? So that's what I'll say. Attend the information session is really important. Last thing, very important tip for engaging with funders. Book a meeting with the grant manager or the program manager or the funding rep. A lot of times with funders, they have paid staff. I want you guys to take this in. There are people that are sitting and their job is literally to sit there and tell you how to get this money. That's their job. Their job, the purpose of why they're on payroll is to sit there, answer your email, answer your phone call, book a meeting online with you so that you can run over your idea. You understand what I'm saying? So if you are not taking advantage of this opportunity, I'm telling you, you're missing out on something, right? So check with a lot of the funders, find out, send an email, make a phone call, find out whether or not there's a program manager, because a lot of times there are people that are on staff whose job it is to help you. So if you don't use that help, you're only hurting yourself, in my view. All right. So moving on. Hopefully, folks are getting this. Um, I don't know who said this, but this was a quote that came to mind as I was planning this. Right. You can't win at the game if you don't know the rules. I'm gonna say that one more time. You can't win at the game if you don't know the rules. That's why I've been emphasizing the eligibility criteria, looking at reading through some of these opportunities as they come across, and understanding the rules of the engagement. What are these people looking for? Why, and how can I? First of all, how can I? Am I a great fit? We're gonna get into some of the questions that we should ask. You should ask yourself before even putting forward an application. But again, this is a great quote. You can't win at the game if you don't know the rules. So learn the rules, and meeting and connecting with people is a great way to do that. And it's a lot better than just, sitting in front of a document and reading through. You know what I mean? All right, here we go. So just a couple things. Um, as some things to remember. Hopefully, you guys are this will stay with you. Number one, you want to start early, especially if you haven't done grants or you're not as familiar with grants. The more time you give yourself to get it all together, is the better. So that's the first hint. The first tip I will give you is definitely start early. Honestly, especially if this is your first time at a grant, don't leave it for the day before. I know, I get it. I'm a musician. I know I love music. I want to practice too. I want to work on my craft. I understand. Like, I get it. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, if you don't get on top of this thing, it can really get away from you, and you might actually end up missing the opportunity. You know what I mean? So start early. Early birds win. Number two, I'm going to say this because I don't know if we really understand when we're talking about grants. This is really important. It's not about you. We need to sometimes, especially, I don't know how you, I don't know. I hang around artists sometimes. I hang around a lot of different musicians, and sometimes musicians can be a little bit, I don't know, for lack of a better word, maybe a little bit into themselves. And that's cool for maybe that's what they're into. Maybe that's part of their vibe or whatever. I don't know. But when it comes to writing grants, it's really not about you. If you go on that, if you approach that grant by saying, okay, I have this project I want to do, I'm about to release this, I'm about to do that, I'm about to do that, and not even care about what they're looking for, you're not even gonna get anywhere. So it's literally not about you. So when you're writing and approaching how to write a grant, remember that you got to get over yourself. Pay attention to the guidelines. Pay attention. Listen to what the funders are saying. Listen to the instructions that are being put out there, and try to align yourself with that. And lastly, review the budget guidelines for spending. Now, this is a little bit of an inside thing, like in terms of, here's what I mean. The budget guidelines are really important. Ultimately, we're applying for a grant. It's free money, as I mentioned, and it's money that's up for grabs. It's a competition, and people can get it. If you have a successful application. So one thing about the budget guidelines that's really important is this: they will tell you what you can and cannot spend the money on. I'm going to say it again. They will tell you what you can and cannot spend the money on. So when you're getting into grant writing, make sure you get your highlighter out or whatever you use and highlight the budget guidelines and check that out. Because look, for all you know, you're thinking of it a certain way. Yeah, like, I'm trying to do some marketing. Yo, I got my album about to come out or whatever, and that's cool. But for some grants, they might be looking for that. You know what I mean? But then this grant is all about you doing workshops to help community young people build healthy, strong relationships. So how is you talking about all of that stuff that you're trying to do going to be relevant to them? The answer is it's not, and you won't get it. It's that simple. So review the budget guidelines, find out what the spending is a lot like, what kinds of things. And usually when you see these things, they'll say, this is what the money can be used for, and this is what it can't. And remember what I said about connecting with people, right? Remember what I said about attending the information session, hitting up the program manager, the grant manager, or whoever it is in charge of the grants. Hit them up and say, hey, like, I want to make sure I understand the budget. Run ideas by them. Can I do this? Would this kind of an idea work? That's what they're there for. Use them. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. Moving on. So at this point, we're gonna move on. But is there anyone have any questions? Are folks get following so far? You can show me by a thumbs up or anything like that. That's cool. If we're good, you have a question? Okay, is that a question? Yeah, yeah. What's your question, brother?
Yeah, so I guess while we're on the budget, because I wrote down a question relative to budgeting, and you covered most of it, except my curiosity is also, it's not like for the grants I've applied to and things I've seen,
Uh-huh.
it's not always explicitly stated if you need to clear like, I suppose like I'll use myself as an example. So in writing the SoundCheck application, I
Yeah.
accounted for a lot of the parts and materials. My thing was to build my instrument and then play it. A
Right.
lot of the parts would be shipped, and then I'm trying to account for tax. So oftentimes, are you trying to take the allotted funds to clear zero, or because I know
That's a
sometimes
great
like, you
question.
can pay
Yeah.
yourself, sometimes you can't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a great question. We're gonna cover it a little bit more, but since you brought it up, what I'll say right now, thanks for that great question, brother. What I'll say is this. With the grants, you want to be as clear as possible. So if your intention is to use a portion of funds provided through this grant to do X and use another portion from some other source to do Y, then say that specifically and say specifically how much of each dollar from source A is going to be used. You understand what I mean? So if you're applying for yeah, so you would literally tell the funder in this case, like, I'm planning to use this funds that's available to do this, right? And so in doing that, and I promise you we'll go a little bit more in depth when we're gonna look at some budgets and look at some stuff in more detail. But yeah, definitely. It's a great question. It's definitely something to consider. Now, another thing to consider as well, some grants will even say to you that some grants, and it depends. Some grants will say you have to have some other source of funding in order to get funding. There's some grants like that. So that if it's just this one funder's pot of money, they'll say, I'm sorry, we're not messing with you. Right? And others will say, it's you're able to if you'd like to, but just sort of they will ask you to state who else you're working with, or even if it's coming, like sometimes it might even be an in-kind donation, right? We're gonna talk more about this stuff though. I don't want to jump too much ahead, but thanks for the question though. That's great. That's great. Anyone else with any questions before we move forward? So we talked about some myths. We talked about some of the things to look out for, some of the tips and pointers. Are we good? Okay, I think we're good to move on. So we'll keep going. So sort of next thing here. Um, so what do I need before I begin? So this is really important. So I'm assuming, my assumption, I don't really know. Maybe you guys can help me. You can say so or in the chat. We kind of have a cool group here. But let me know because I'm assuming that we're working with a lot of musicians. Is everyone here like into music in some way or into art? Okay, okay, awesome. I'm seeing some head nods, so that's good. So one of the things in a lot of the art specific or music specific granting spaces, and you're gonna see this a lot, is they're asking for an artist CV. So does anyone know what that is? If you know, just feel free to turn your mic on and chime in if you know.
Uh,
It- yeah,
Extended
go ahead.
Latin curriculum vitae, but it's like basically your like professional history or like yeah where you've exhibited, the stuff you've done, any awards you've received before. Like it's
Exactly.
your resume, it's your artist resume.
Bang on. I love it, man. You're right. You got this, brother. It's literally your artist resume. It's literally that's what it is. It's an artist resume, and they're asking. It's something that you use to showcase your professional experience. All right. And so it's some. So for example, you mentioned any exhibits. If like I'm a guitarist, I'll use myself as an example. That's where I would want to showcase places that I've played, gigs that I've done, any records that I might have recorded on, any session work that I might have done for artists, any recordings that I might have of my own original stuff, etc. So this is a place where you basically showcase your professional artistic experience. And now a lot of this workshop is designed specifically for black musicians, and so I'm going to speak as if I'm speaking to black musicians. Now a lot of the what I realize about a lot of these applications, and this is just my learned experience, is that it doesn't really feel like they're written for us in a lot of ways. And let me just be real, because a lot of the things that they're looking for and a lot of the questions that they're asking, I know for a lot of people that are amazing in terms of their art, for example, they'll look at it and be like, hey, based on this, they're saying I'm not professional enough or I'm not together enough or whatever. So one of the things that I find within specifically within black community, but not only the black community, but I find this specifically, is that we actually have a tendency to play down our achievements. And so what do I mean? So for example, I'll use myself as an example. A lot of how I grew up and to this day came up musically was playing in church. Now, playing in church, if you might think of that and be like, how is that professional experience? Did you rehearse? Did you did you have a rehearsal? Did you perform? Was it recorded? Was there how many times were you doing that? How many people? What was your audience? All of these things are professional experience. And so again, we have a tendency to play down as opposed to playing up. And what I would suggest, and this is something that comes on a little bit later, the purpose of a grant is to be truthful. You can't lie, you can't make up stories. But at the end of the day, don't don't undercut yourself and your own achievements, right? Be open and honest about what you've done and really think about it. Spend some time when you're working on your CV to really think about it. Like think about how many places you've performed. Think about, in fact, think about some of those Insta videos you're putting up out there. Those are recordings. How many people, what's the traction like? How many people are following you? How many people are into what you're doing? How many people are commenting? How many, like pay attention to these things because to you, you can, these are things that you might overlook and say, I'm not, I'm not professional or whatever. But one of the, for example, one of the criterias I know in a lot of different arts councils, we'll talk more about them, is that other professional musicians are propping you up for what you're doing. Like other industry experts are recognizing you as somebody coming up in the industry or as somebody that has potential or as somebody that might be even exceeding their potential. And so when you have other musicians or artists coming on your page and commenting and saying things and sharing their work, that's literally what they're talking about. But it's just, again, it's how you present that, if you understand what I mean. Are folks following what I'm saying here? Okay, awesome. So the artist CV. So remember, get this done before you even look at a grant. Like get this stuff done first because what you want to be is grant ready. You want to be ready for when the grant hits, especially when it's a fit. You want to be ready to go. You don't want to be fumbling and, oh, shoot, I need to do this and I got to do this and now I need this, right? So the next thing is...
Can I just add something?
Okay, yes. Go ahead, sweetheart.
Yeah, so the artist CV is very important. Personally, I come from an HR background, and I know that it can be intimidating to have to write your resume or go into an interview and really play yourself up. But it's very important to do that in your artist CV. Also, um, a lot of times these grantors and funders are looking for a bio of some sort. And it's important that you put that together prior to, because sometimes having a deadline approaching, you can kind of be fumbling and not really know what to say about yourself. So I would say, in order to prep for this, to get your bio clearly articulated from now, get it edited, make sure that you have all of the most important works and achievements that you've accomplished in that, as well as try your best to get a professional photo done. So, what we're really saying is be confident and don't downplay what you're doing, but also don't hurt yourself by not presenting yourself with the best foot forward. So get your artist CV. Use websites like Canva that can, really put together a beautiful artist CV. Don't just use, Microsoft Word necessarily. Put something nice together. Get your picture professionally taken, and get your bio written and edited by, a teacher or a professor or one of us if you need us to, and really put yourself together so that funders can really understand who you are and what it is that you do. Also, on your social media outlets, I would also say make sure that you're portraying what you want people to see. And that's all I'll say.
We had to go finger snaps for that one, but no, that's some key wisdom right there. That's bang on. Um, so yeah, just to finish up this slide. So compilation of finished works, right? So what you want to do is have keyword finished, right? I know how it could be. I'm a musician, I'm an artist, I get it. Sometimes we have some cool stuff sitting, that we want to finish, it hasn't been finished, but that's not what you want to present, right? You want the stuff that's out there, that's, if you're a musician, stuff that's been properly mixed, properly mastered, stuff that you're proud of. That's ultimately the question. It should be stuff that you yourself are confident in and say, yes, this is a representation of my work, of my playing, of my art. You know what I mean? So compilation of finished work, that's something you want to have. So have, when I say compilation, files, have, if it's a record, have the files ready, have, if it's video footage of you performing, get this stuff together. One of the suggestions I put here in the notes, digital folders work great. Google Drive is a great resource. You get, like, I don't know if it's 10 or 5 or 10 gigs of free, like, cloud-based storage. So even if your computer's full or whatever, put stuff, go on Google Drive, create a folder, and just start putting your stuff in there, right? Label the folder, call it my finished works or whatever, and just start getting stuff together. Because what you'll learn is the more prepared you are, is the more confident and the more better you'll be in terms of preparing your application. All right. So last point here, other links. So I mentioned this a bit. Other links to performance. Have this ready, right? Any kind of media recognition. Maybe you've been in the paper. Maybe some websites have been writing about you. Whatever. Have all that stuff ready and ready to go and in one place. Not, don't just say, "Oh, I know where that is." Oh, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. Listen to me. Put it in one place. Put it in one file. Put it in one digital file, and now it's my my Jamaican son. It's sought out, right? You know what I mean? So anyway, um, you follow what I'm saying, right? So, last thing, so letters of support. Some grants will ask for this letters of support, like, it could be a community agency, it could be another artist, it could be, sometimes with the letters of support, you definitely want to have them, right? It's all, remember, building a grant or writing a good grant, it's presenting a strong case. You want to show the strongest case possible. So it's like, if there's other people that can vouch and praise and say, hey, I dig what this person's doing, then you 100% want that. You know what I mean? Secondly, so trustee agreement, that's some grants if you're not, it's some grants, if you're not like established in terms of, you know, maybe you haven't incorporated your business yet, or maybe there's some things that you still haven't done as far as getting your professional, the way you want to present yourself professionally done. Some grants will give you options to actually still access resources without a lot of those things. That's something that we mentioned, looking at different grassroots funds and stuff like that. And so with that, usually it happens in what's called some kind of a trustee agreement. Sometimes they're called organizational mentor agreements. But basically, the idea is you have some kind of a legal entity, whether that's a nonprofit organization like SoundCheck, or some legal entity that will basically manage your project for you. In other words, you come under the umbrella of their organization, you come under the umbrella of their policies, you know, their how they do their payroll, how they run, you know, all their admin and organizational policies. And basically it becomes like almost like a protection for you. If you may not have some of that stuff, it's like you can still access money through one of these agreements. Now, of course, there's a fee involved. Whether some it can range from anywhere between as low as 5 and even as high as maybe 15. I haven't really seen anything higher than 15%, but but think about it. It does take resources, time, and you know, things from those agencies. And so, you know, it's sort of, you know, it's a trade-off. It's sort of like, do I want to access this? But it is a good way. And to be honest, for a lot of years, our story with SoundCheck, um, a lot of years, yeah, we've been working with, and still to this day, for some projects, we still continue to work with trustees because it's just a lot easier when they handle certain things and we don't have to worry about it. In some cases, we'll, you know, we still are administering projects on our own, but for a long time, we were solely working with trustee organizations and such, and so we understand that. Uh, okay, so now we're getting into the meat and potatoes here, right? We're doing good, y'all. You're hanging in there with me. So basically, now we're getting to the writing process. So I like to think of it 4 steps, 4 step progress process to grant writing success. 4 steps. Step number one, reflection. Step number two, conception. Step number three, the writing. And step number four, the review. So we're going to talk about each one of these. So don't worry, we're going to break it down and you'll be able to understand exactly how you can approach this. And this is, to be honest, this is literally the exact format that we use in terms of our grants. We literally follow this. Now, sometimes it happens over in a very in a shorter time, but it's still the same process that we're going through. All right. So let's go on. So step one, reflection. So this is your chance to be really honest with yourself and look in the mirror of the mirror of the eligibility criteria. You know, this is where you really have to look at what folks are looking for as far as the funders out there, and look at yourself and what you want to do, and ask yourself some really important questions, right? And this is where you have to be really honest with yourself, because you'll save yourself some headache and heartache if you just be honest with yourself in this moment, right? So first thing is, does your idea align with one or more of the funder objectives? People, if it doesn't, and you try shooting for the stars to make it happen, it's gonna appear obvious in the application that it doesn't fit. So just save yourself some trouble, and again, be very honest with yourself. Look at those criteria, look at what they're looking for specifically, and ask yourself if your idea or what you're proposing actually applies to them. Because at the end of the day, it's great what you want to do, but if it doesn't apply to what they're saying, they're just going to be like, okay, no, sorry, right? And so the more you're able to align with one or more of the funder objectives, the better your chance. And now another thing that I'll mention here is this. With the funder objectives, it's really important. With the funder objectives, don't just click every objective just because you think, oh, the more I click is like the more chances I have of getting this thing. people, family, listen to me. If there is, let's say there's 5 criteria and your idea clearly aligns with one, but it kind of aligns with 2 others, and then marginally a fourth, and you just throw them all in there just to say, hey, they're probably just going to see it. And listen to me. You're better off selecting one and making a very clear, direct connection than just listing 3 or 4 or 5 objectives that you don't even have the ability to explain in your application, right? So save yourself some trouble, save yourself some work in terms of even trying to make that happen, those connections. And less sometimes, it's weird, but less sometimes is more. Remember, these people don't know you, they haven't seen you. All they have is a piece of paper on what you wrote. So the clearer you can be, the better you are doing yourself in terms of a service. All right. Next thing, so ask yourself this: do I have enough time to put together an application? Writing a grant, especially if you're just doing it for the first time, it's more of a marathon than it is a sprint. It takes time to put together everything and make sure that it's presentable and that you know what you're saying. And again, you've aligned with the objectives, you've gone through the process. We're going to talk more about the writing process. It's better that give yourself enough time, like if there's a grant that comes out and it takes, the deadline is a month away or 2 months away. Don't just wait till 2 weeks or a week to start on it. Start on it literally the second you can, the second it comes out if you can. Because especially when you're just starting out, that extra time to build those connections, to talk to people about your ideas, to bring it all together is going to be so invaluable. You understand? So lastly, the last point here, beyond eligibility, is this opportunity right for me? So let me talk to this a little bit, right? There's more to it than just being eligible. Honestly, some things are going to cost too much, in my opinion, and it's just not worth doing it. Because, for example, if you have to change the integrity of your work and the integrity of who you are as an artist, or the integrity of what you're trying to do or accomplish, just to fit some kind of funder's objective, in my view, it's not worth it. And that's how I approach certain things, is that I make sure that beyond the eligibility, sure, I'm eligible, sure, this could be for me, but beyond that, like, get to those deep things that bring meaning for you, and ask yourself, is this the right opportunity for me? Maybe they're asking me to compromise on one of my values, and maybe that's not, and for me, that's not something I'm going to do. You know what I mean? Again, I'm just giving you some tools and some suggestions of how to approach this, so that when it comes to the actual grant writing process, it can be as smooth and as streamlined as possible. All right. So
I'd like to add to that last point. Also, too, sometimes the money just does not make sense, and you need to be open to just accept that the $5,000 grant is not going to support your $25,000 project. Sometimes you just be like, yeah, it sounds great, but I can't do it for $5,000. I can't. And you just don't waste your time, right? So it's my little 2 cents on that.
Hey, y'all, that's experience talking, by the way. That's experience talking. So yeah, is it right before I write? That's what I like to say. Is it right before I write? Before I put pen to paper, is it right? You know what I mean? For me. So we're gonna keep moving on. You guys are doing a really good job. Thanks for hanging with us. We're making some great progress. So number one, I think everyone's clear on the reflection stage. Number two, the conception stage. So this is where now you've done that reflection, you've looked at those eligibility, you looked in the mirror of the grant and what they're asking, you really read through, you understand what it's all about. Now is the time to really get out of your head, right? This is the time where you want to work through some ideas with the supports that are available to you. So this is a time where you want to really reach out to those program managers, reach out to those grant officers, reach out to all those supports that are available, and take advantage of the fact that they're there to help you, right? And help and don't just conceive the idea on your own and think that, oh, um I have to do it sort of in my own head and in a silo. No. Like you can run ideas by these people. They're people, right? Like they're people. Like sometimes you have to realize like they're humans, like just like you. You know what I mean? They're people. And so running ideas by some of these people that you have access to is a great idea. You know how many times we've taken advantage of opportunities to say, hey, I have 2 or 3 or 4 things that I'm thinking of. Which one do you think best aligns with what you're trying to do? You know what I mean? Brilliant. Like, do that. You should be doing, take advantage of that. You know what I mean? So this is the time, the conception stage. This is where you really want to start narrowing down your ideas. Again, start narrowing down. If there's 4 or 5 funding objectives, try to narrow it down as much as you can so that everything could be about focus. And it's like to use this as an analogy, it's kind of like there's some things that are gonna come at you. I'm not a boxer, but I've seen boxing before, and it's like things are gonna come at you, and you kind of have to no, that's not for me. Oh no, I'm not gonna do that. No, oh, whoo, right? And when you're writing the grant, you just want it to be like everything. Like if the grant is about you creating your original work, it's like everything you say from beginning to end, from the first question about who you are to the end of it. It's like oh, jab, ooh, right? This is who I am. I align. I'm aligning. I'm in alignment. Alignment. Right? You wanna be right on it. You know what I mean? Forgive my analogy. I have a kind of a weird sense of humor sometimes, but that's kind of how I think of it. It's like you just really you want to drive the point home. There should be no cause at the end of the day, even if they don't fund you, they better know what this was about. They better be crystal clear, like looking at themselves in the mirror in the morning, like crystal clear of what you were trying to say to them. And that's the way I approach it. And I think it's a good way. We found a lot of success doing that. And it just really helps to just keep driving home the main points. Keep hitting on what they want to hear. And that's a good strategy, I would say. So conception. So working through your ideas with the supports available. What I would say is remember they can't read your mind. So don't just think vague answers or vague, you know, references are going to let them understand what you're saying. It's on you, it's literally on you to be the one to say, I'm going to make sure that I'm writing as clearly as I can. And I have some tips of how you can do that. So there's some really tips that have helped us over the years. So remember they can't read your mind, and remember they can't do your job. So like it's not like one of those things where you hit up the program manager and be like, hey, what's going on? Okay, the grant deadline's coming up. Like, I kind of need some help on it though. Like, like what are you saying? Can you like it's not one of those, everyone. Like, they can't they're not gonna do your job. They're there to help you do your job. There's a difference, so just be mindful of that. And then lastly, just talk it out with someone. Like honestly, even if there's not sometimes, so not every grant will have an opportunity to connect with someone in terms of like the fund or whatever. But talk it out with someone. Like hit up someone that doesn't know the idea, someone that you haven't actually that's fresh to the idea, and see if they can follow what you're saying. Right? Talk it out and see where where some of the holes are in terms of, oh, you didn't say that clearly, or oh, I know you mentioned you wanted to do a music program, but like what instruments were you going to do? You didn't say that. Like, like you sometimes you need someone else to just point. I think my wife is that person for me. I thank God for her. But, sometimes you need someone to just point and help you along the way. You know what I mean? And sometimes those people could be really helpful. So I highly, highly recommend find someone to talk it over with and get outside your head. Because sometimes, especially when you've been reflecting and working through, you get in your head a lot and you got to get out. You know what I mean? It's kind of like COVID. You kind of just have to get outside a little bit, fresh air again. You know what I mean? A walk. like you got to do these things again, right? All right. So moving on. Okay, so say Shay, you want to do this stage? In terms of this?
Sure. So yeah, the writing part obviously very important. You need time to pull it all together. So this will mean you're going to be writing your first response. Then you're going to read it again, make some tweaks. Then you're going to call, if you can, the program manager or a support person, and ask them, do you understand what I'm saying here? Did I answer the question? And that's why you need time. So you need time to put it all together. And then, oh gosh, we've had some situations where we were done the grant, but then the last page asked you to upload stuff. It was over. We didn't get it submitted.
Mm-hmm.
The grant was done, but the uploading killed us. So you need time to put it all together. And that's why it's also important to have all your uploadable files in a very accessible place. Like having to search your computer to find your picture and then your bio, and then they want it on a PDF, and it's too much. So you need time to put it all together. So clarity and precision. You need to be very clear when you're answering the questions because, as we said on the last slide, they're not in your head and they don't do your job. So you have to be very clear and only say what you want them to know. The irrelevant points, don't add. It'll make it all fuzzy. Sometimes these funders have hundreds of applications to go through, and you want to make sure yours stands out because it was very clear in how you wrote. Headings are good, and that's on the next point. Headers and point forms, bullets, like it just helps. If you're gonna, for example, explain the objectives and how your project aligns, or if they say, can you summarize your project, which we'll get into later, you want to talk about, okay, here's my project goals, list those goals, here's my project's objectives, and this is how I plan to meet each of those through my project. And that way, just from glancing, they're like, oh, I remember that project. They said they were going to do X, Y, Z, and this is how they're going to do it. So, yeah.
Great. Awesome. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, sweetheart. So basically, just a couple points I would just add. She did a great job. One thing that's really important on that last point that she mentioned with the headers and the bullets. You talk about clarity. There's nothing clearer to a lot of these people I found than being able to use certain tools. So things like number systems, and it sounds complicated, but if I start saying 5 things to you at random or without saying that I'm saying 5 things to you, all of a sudden it becomes confusing. So for example, if I say for this project, I would like to, I want to get a group of young mentors together. I want them all to be musicians from the Black community with lived experience. I want them to be able to offer a workshop on how to create music that tells stories. And I want to, you can see how it kind of starts becoming, again, not bad. Maybe they can read it, maybe they can follow it. But a little bit of advice. Say to them, there are 5 things that I'm trying to achieve. Number 1, blah, blah, blah. Number 2, XYZ. Number 3, this and that. And all of a sudden, you said the exact same thing that you were saying. But because you presented it that way, these people are going to be like, wow, like these people, man, they really know what they're doing, right? Because again, just understanding these little tips, using pointer headers, point form, numbers, letters, A, B, C, D, simple things, but in a granting scenario, they can be really effective. And guess what? When somebody has to read through hundreds and hundreds of paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of information, I don't care how many grants they've been adjudicating or reviewing as a panelist, they're going to start getting tired. It's just human. They're humans at the end of the day. So my thing is, it's like if all of a sudden they read through 50 that were just a bunch of paragraphs and a lot of stuff and very dense, and all of a sudden they have this really easy to follow one, two, three, four, A, B, C, D, kind of thing, jot forms where it counts, that's gonna be something that they appreciate. Everyone follow what I'm saying? So this is just some pointers that I think will really help you advance in terms of your grant writing skills. I know it's been super helpful for us. Like we're like, gone are the days now of paragraphs upon paragraphs. Sometimes it calls for that, but it's so much clearer. It's even better for you. It's even helpful for you to just be able to say, this is what I'm trying to do, right? So moving on. Okay, so we're getting it a bit into the meat and the potatoes. So with the writing, so we just talked about writing in a general sense. So now we're getting into the meat, like what are we writing, right? So here we go. So like this is the meat and potatoes. We're getting into the first thing that I suggest you really start with when you're getting into the writing stage. So this is after you did the reflection, you did the conception, you've been reaching out to people, running your ideas, getting feedback, all that good stuff, right? I would suggest start with your budget. There's a couple reasons why I suggest that. Reason number one is because sometimes when you're writing the grant first and you're making all these promises, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Remember the jobs? You're coming at them. We're doing this. Yeah, I got that. Yeah, I'm in alignment. We're doing this. We're doing that. We're gonna do that. And sometimes you over promise, and now you go back to the budget because usually in applications the budget doesn't come until like later on. Like first, usually you'll see like the questions like, oh, tell us about yourself, or this and that and that. And they kind of get through some questions and then the budget comes after. But in my view, the way you should do it is start by doing the budget first, because that way you're going to be grounded in reality in terms of what you're trying to do and in terms of how you're planning to do it. You know what I mean? So where the dollar stops, you'll be able to say, okay, truly, I wanted to do, like, for example, let's say you're trying to do music workshops, or let's say you're trying to, I don't know, let's say you want to release an EP or something like that, right? And you can start by saying, oh, I'm going to do this. We're going to have a listening party. We're going to do this. We're going to have a marketing campaign. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And you start saying, yeah, I'm going to do this and that. And then you go back to the budget and you start costing it out. Okay, how much do I have to pay my marketing manager? How much do I have to pay? Maybe you have a manager. Maybe you have a company that does your graphics. Maybe you have, how much am I going to actually have to pay out of this? And then when you start adding it up, you're like, oh, shoot, like I thought $5,000 was a lot. But when you do the math, you're like, hang on. You know what I mean? It's humbling sometimes. So my suggestion is start with the budget. Number one, this is going back to your point, Eric. I think you mentioned this, right? Be as specific and clear as possible. So with your budget, the last thing you want is ambiguity. And I know what you're probably thinking, because I've been there. Oh, maybe I'll just kind of like use some language like program materials or like marketing, like I'll use some cool blanket language to kind of figure out what I want to do later. You know those ones? I've been there, right? And it's like, that's not the way you want to approach this, because the more clear you are, like someone will see that application that's really vague and they have to kind of, it's up for interpretation. And then they'll see a person that says, hey, so I want to work with person, here's their name, here's their rate, here's whatever. All of a sudden, if you're a funder, it's like, okay, number one, person A doesn't kind of really, he's not giving me an idea what he's doing, right? But person B, I know exactly, I can call them. He gave me the number. Like, I'm being a little bit extra, but like, you understand, like, it's that level of being clear and specific that's going to help you with your budget. Be transparent. So show the breakdown of your figures. If it's $2,000 artist fees and that works out to $200 per session, say that. Break it down. Don't show them no lumps and stuff that they can't really understand, because again, no room for ambiguity. No room for you want to keep, again, driving your point home, right? Driving home the key points. And lastly, look at the eligible oh my goodness. Look at the eligible and ineligible expenses. Again, so when you're on your budget, you understand and you're not putting things in your budget that might potentially be damaging to your application because you forgot that they don't actually fund. Because some you might be surprised, for example, some people might not fund equipment, and maybe your whole project is about getting certain gear that you need to do recording or whatever. They may not be funding that. So you have to actually look out for those things and look at the eligible and ineligible expenses so that your budget, again, alignment. Remember what I said. Think back to the analogy. There's things you have to avoid, and then there's things you want to be driving home, right? Okay, moving on. Let's see here. Uh, so we talked about the budget. Now, a lot of grants, not all, but a lot of grants will also ask you for a work plan. So a work plan is simply, sometimes they're called project plans, sometimes they're called work plans, sometimes they're called sometimes they may not even be called specifically a work plan. They might just say describe what you're planning to do. All of those things are pseudonyms for what I'm about to talk about. It's the same thing. All right. So after you got your budget worked out and you know exactly where you are, your work plan is what makes the most logical sense, right? You're gonna know because you just worked out your whole budget. You're gonna literally know exactly what you want to do as far as a work plan. So again, something that carries over from the budget is being as clear and specific as possible, right? uh, that's something that you always want to be doing, not just in the work plan, but in every part of your application, but especially in the work plan, because that's where they're supposed to follow how you plan to do what you said you're going to do, right? And so be as specific, as clear as possible, and your work plan and your budget must align. Think of them as a coin. They're just another side of the same coin. So, for example, one mistake that a lot of people make is they might mention something in their work plan that's not clearly shown in the budget. Like, for example, let's say I'm doing a session and I say I'm going to record the session and put it on YouTube. Whoa, how are you recording it? The funder is going to have a question. How are you recording it? Do you have equipment? Did you say that? Or are you trying to use equipment for, from their funds to do that? They're going to look at your budget and say, oh, hang on. Wait, equipment? Wait, he said he wants to record it. How is he recording it? Ambiguity, unclearness. They're going to go for the ones that are more clear because they don't know how you're planning to do the recording that you said and putting it on YouTube. Versus if you said, oh, we have recording or camera equipment to record the sessions, or specifically in the budget, we're spending X amount on a camera and a tripod or whatever so that we can record the sessions. You see what I'm saying? Those are key things. Question.
Yeah, I actually did have a question on that. So, like, are you saying that it is very important? So, like, I'm sitting in a studio that I don't know many people who still have access to theirs, and like, give thanks I do. Like, are these things that I should be? I know you were saying like don't downplay things. It never even occurred to me that I should be maybe mentioning that like I'm saving cost by not like I'm. This is afforded to me. I have like
Oh
make you like
yeah,
yeah, the tools are here to build it.
100%. Shay, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think you should definitely mention that you're using your own studio, or is it yours, or someone lent it to you, or?
I'm doing like I'm a student researcher at the
Mhm.
university. So in terms of space, I have a wood shop, a metal shop, and then like we do electronic work like in here.
Okay.
And this is still afforded to me, but then there's other like I think I've spent a good amount of time in community. Just that's what I do with my networking, making sure I still have access to things and like that kind of agency. So
Yeah.
it never just occurred like in my mind, I'm like, yeah, it's not something I need to line out. But you're like what you're saying is to be clear about like I never mentioned it because I'm saving the money because I have it. Like I don't need
Exactly.
Yeah, so in that case, what you could do is mention that in the project details, or like the project description line, or you could put that in the budget, but put it as, like you could put it and put the cost there, but then in a separate note, put that it's coming from somewhere else. So it would practically be in kind.
Exactly. Like you might see it in some grants, like the way they do their budget format, you might specifically see a section called in kind, which is where you would want to put all of that and think and literally sit down and think about it because they need to know how resourceful you are in leveraging other resources to make their resource stretch, right?
You definitely want to say like what you just said to us about the fact that you're very keen on leveraging connections and making those connections that can help you in your craft. So definitely say that if there isn't a place that asks for in-kind donations, put it in the place where you're describing your project, and also talk about how having that space impacts the project. And then if there's a question that says, "Is there anything else we need to know?" Definitely put it there as well.
Thank you. That was
Awesome.
super clear.
Okay, I'm glad. So last thing I would suggest with any time when you're thinking about work plans or any kind of description about what are you going to do, think in stages. Like think in stages. Just do yourself a favor and think in stages. Even if it's just one stage, break it down into three. For some reason, they like to see that. And again, this is just I'm here's what I mean. The funders are looking to follow a certain logic throughout your application, right? Because they don't know you, they don't know your project, they don't know your work. And so when you break things down into stages, it becomes again these little tiny bites that people can digest a little bit more easily. So for example, if you're when I say think in stages, think like this: first, second, third, fourth. These are things that they seem so simple, but they show a lot uh, of thoughtfulness and a lot of organization and a lot of depth to the level that you've thought out an idea. And when someone says, wow, this person really knows what they're saying, you're only helping yourself as far as your chances of being awarded that grant. Because it's like, look, I can really understand what they're saying. I'm really following along. It makes a lot of logical sense. I can see exactly how they're planning to do this. They're going to do some outreach at first. They're going to go to the community connections that they have. This person's working at the university. He's going to be reaching out through his network. Okay, awesome. I see that. I can see that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can see that flyers are going out at a certain time. I can see that. Okay, I can see connections here. I can see, and all of a sudden, you just putting all of that in a paragraph, it won't shine through necessarily. But all of a sudden you saying first, or just putting a number. Here's my work plan. Number one, number two, number three. First, think logical. When I say in stages, think about the logical order. What's happening first? What's happening second? What's happening third? What's happening fourth? That demonstrates a level of awareness as well as preparedness in terms of being able to execute your idea, and that's ultimately what you have to show. All right. So that's some advice. So now, lastly, my suggestion in terms of how to address this. So the last question. So we talked about budget. We talked about work plan. Remember, not everyone will have a work plan, but you better believe just about every grant, if not every, is going to have some kind of a budget breakdown or some kind of budget question that they're asking about, right? Because it's a grant after all. And so, in terms of answering the questions, what you want to do is you want to um, do this once your budget and your work plan is done. In my view, again, you've now got a really clear plan. It's sequential, it's in order, it's logical, it's consistent. And so now what you want to do is you literally want to be able to, when you go to those questions to answer them, like a lot of the heavy lifting is done because the questions are to gain clarity on what and how you're going to do it. And so if you've already spent a lot of time investing in the work plan and the budget, which in a lot of cases are actually worth high scoring, especially the budget in terms of a lot of grants. If your budget is all over the place or it doesn't make sense, or maybe you just thought that you could just they're looking for a very clear and articulate budget. So if your budget's messy, it's all over the place, it doesn't really align with the words that you're saying in your questions, it's all of these things are create doubt, and doubt equals unclarity, and unclarity equals someone else is going to get the project who's clear. It's that simple. So when you make sure you answer, so the couple of tips on this, make sure you answer each question, right? So one question might say, tell us about yourself. How long have you been playing? What's your art form? When did you get into it? Sometimes that's just grouped under one question. Tell us about yourself. And then maybe in the subheadings, there's all those other questions, right? And so one of the things you want to make sure you do is actually answer all of the questions that were asked in that bunch of questions, you know? And it could seem self-evident, but trust me. And what I like to do when I'm doing my prep for my work is I will literally list each question and put the answer in bullet points under it. That way I know, like I'll have a separate doc that I do that. We'll talk about the importance of doing that. But I will have a separate document where I literally will put each question and then put my responses right on. That way I know for sure I'm not missing anything. I've spoken to every single question that they've asked, right? Another thing to pay attention to is the word count limits. Guys, this is like experience talking again. Sometimes you've been working on your Word doc or whatever, and which I recommend, by the way, because some of these grant portals are the worst. You start working on them, you refresh your page, everything's gone. All your work just gone. So like it's, oh my gosh, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. You don't want to be there. Please learn from my mistakes. Do it for me. Learn from my mistakes. Don't do that, right? To yourself. But the one thing about the word count, about working on a Google Docs, is sometimes you may not be aware of what the word count limits are. So what I like to do is if I know this section is 200 words, for example, I will literally put 200, when I write the question on my doc, I'll put 200 words. And then I know how to, if you're familiar with Google Docs, that's what I use. It's a great resource and it's free. So if you use Google Docs or something like that, you can literally, in the software of Google Docs, get it to count the words for you. So I will highlight a section and ask Google Docs, how much words is this? Because I want to make sure I stay on top of that so that I don't, when it comes to, because we've been in situations where the grant's been done and then, don't do this, guys, but we've been in situations where the grant's been done and we're trying to get it in like right before a tight deadline, and all it is pasting. But then you realize in the pasting time that it takes time to reduce those words. It doesn't just happen. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden you're just deleting stuff out of your grant. That's really important. Been there, done it. I'm gonna tell you guys the truth, man. Been there, done it. Learn from some of our mistakes. Pay attention to the word count limits. They can be a real. They can get you if you're not careful. And lastly, as we mentioned before, be as detailed and specific as possible. I find the general questions are great places to use bullet points. Again, being very detailed. This is where your headings can come in real nice as well, in terms of explaining your ideas. And, like all of those things make a big difference. So I don't know, Shay, did you have anything to add to this point or are you good? Okay, cool. Awesome. So we're getting through. We're getting through. Um, so I hope folks are finding this helpful. Answers to some common questions. So this next part, first of all, I just want to hear from you guys a little bit. We've been talking for a while. What are some common questions that you've seen in grants? I just want to know. Maybe you could say it or write it or anything. Just if you know. What are like? Just tell me. What are some? Have you come across some questions that you find or? Sorry, I'm not hearing you. Hang on. Oh, my bad. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't even know if that was me, but I will say like a work back schedule and knowing how to write them appropriately is kind of a thing I'm really having to get hip to. Like how like on a project management tip, not even just like where the money flows, but I've seen grants where they're asking like in stage, like this week I'm spending this much, this month I'm spending this month, or
Right.
this much rather. So yeah, common question. I think it's something I'm still trying to get the hang of.
Okay. Okay, that's cool. That's fair enough. Yeah, like you'll find that there are similarities and differences. Again, it just really depends. Goes right back to what we've been driving home. Who is this funder? What are they about? What are they looking for? You know, and getting those pieces out of the way. But one of the common questions, I'll just tell you a couple just right off here. So, and actually, we have a list. Shay, do you have that there? So we have a list of some common questions. Here. Why don't It's on. I think it's on your computer. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and then you can get it. Tell me when you have it. I'll just continue on this point. You can give me a signal when you're ready. Okay, I think she's ready. So yeah, go ahead. Just share your screen there.
Okay, everyone can see it? Good? Awesome. Okay. So yeah, we put together a list of some frequently asked questions just based on what we've come across in grants that we've written. So this one here, the first one, what considerations are you keeping in mind in light of COVID-19? This is not necessarily a frequently asked question, but it's one that's coming up on applications that are out in this season. So in terms of tips on how to answer that, I would definitely say be aware and abreast to the ever-changing COVID-19 bylaws. And you want to always make sure that you mention how it will affect your project and or what amendments or considerations you will be making. Yeah. Any questions on that? Yeah, so for example, SoundCheck, we really pride ourselves on having a physical space for musicians to come together and collaborate and work together. But in light of COVID-19, obviously we can't do that. So we've had to change the way we're delivering our projects, and now it's shifted to online. So any applications we're going to be putting out this year and until the restrictions are up, we have to mention that it's going to be online. All right, so next one, project start date and project end date. Very important, but what some people don't keep in mind is that it's very important to make sure that you check that the date when you need to start your project falls within the eligible start and end times of the grants you're applying for. For example, some grants may say you cannot, like if this project starts before June 1st, you can't, you're not eligible. Or if it ends after December 31st, it's not eligible. So keep that in mind and look for those things in the eligibility requirements. Next one, tell us about yourself. Joel spoke to this already. He mentioned, oh, sorry, did you have a question?
No, I think.
No, okay. So you want to be as bold and confident as possible. Think of this as a chance to market or promote your artistry and or project. So things that I've listed here, share your history, share your mission, your vision, your values, and your goals, if that applies to you. So that's more so if you're a collective or if you are working with a group. Share why you started. Talk about why this work is important to you. Talk about what you're currently working on, and speak to how what you currently do is in alignment with the current grant's objectives. Joel, you want to add anything?
No, you're
No?
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So another one, the outreach and audience development. So these questions are literally taken from grants. Describe your target audience and or the constituency you intend to serve with the project. What outreach, marketing, and or audience development strategies will you use to reach them? And how will you evaluate the effectiveness of your strategies? So this question is really asking, how do you plan to promote your program based on the community that you're reaching to? That you're planning to reach out to. They want to make sure that you are able to spread the word about your project effectively. And then also, when talking about how you're going to evaluate that, maybe you want to list things like on a registration form, we will ask a question that states, how did you hear about this project? Just to see what your most effective outreach methods were. Next question. What opportunity, challenge, or issue will this initiative address? So this is something that you want to know before writing the application. It'll help you frame your application effectively. So in this case, you would use personal experiences and readily available research as proof that what you are planning to do will address a specific issue, and you need to talk about that issue. And then what are you hoping to achieve? Similar to the question about your vision here, you want to describe in more detail specific ways in which you plan to address these issues through your project. Any questions so far?
Yes, I do have a question actually. Now, I definitely to the outreach and audience development point, like marketing personally is not a strong suit for me. I'm wondering if though, like, and I can tie this into a question I was going to ask him earlier. The web is like internet and kind of coding and making my own sites. If it came to time to like, if you're talking about how to like, I guess a plan for promotion, but also to show that partnership, like show that credit to the funders, or maybe it's like a little tag or whatever. I'm wondering the utility of, because I'm trying to get off social media, and I'm wondering if it's equally as effective to the grant writers or the parties funding, if I can say like I host that though, like it's not like Twitter can take it down one day or Instagram can take it. It's on my website. I'm just like curious about the utility of me mentioning that in future applications, but also PDFs, because I'm reading through this and realizing that there's a lot of stuff that's I just redid my site and still building it, but I should probably put like things like this, like my bio's there and there's a one or two press photos, but then it's like I should probably put a raw link to a downloadable PDF of my CV then, like that's updated from there. Like is there a utility in me having like everything at my own link? Like go to ericslyfield.com, it's all there.
Oh, go ahead, babe.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would just say 100%, brother. Like that's great. Like if you have a website that's well put together, that showcases and has all the information, that's great. That is wonderful. And if you mention that you're the one that did it, that's great as well. You can let them know, like I've got a lot of experience, with online marketing, right? I've done, all the work on my site here has been done by myself. etc. Like again, play up the fact that those are skill sets that you have and that you plan to use to the success of the project or the application. So that's definitely 100%. I would say 100%. That's something that you're gonna want to talk about in terms of the outreach, for sure. Um, yeah, that's all I have to say to that.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Just make sure that since you're not using social media, you upload a lot to your site. So you have like a lot of exposure on your site. So the funder can get a very robust picture of what you do and who you are. Okay, so next one, I think we did, what are you hoping to achieve?
Yeah, I think that's where we are.
Okay, so similar to the question about your vision.
Actually, no, I think we did it.
We did this one?
I think so.
Okay. How will your initiative benefit young people, their communities, and the sector? So this is a question that we literally took from the Youth Opportunities Fund, which is funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation. So they focus a lot on building resilient communities and funding youth and youth programs. So depending on who your funder is, you'd answer a question similar to this, like talking about the lasting impacts that your project will have after the grant is over. So an example of that would be if you're planning to do, a music showcase and you want to have other artists come out and share their craft. Maybe what at the end of that, what you do is like a CD, and the lasting impact of that is that the community members will all have, a chance to get that CD for free, and they'll always remember that event and how it impacted them. All right.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I think we missed some here. Did we? No, we're good.
Awesome. So yeah, just so folks are following, um, perfect. I'll get this back. I'll just get the PowerPoint back. Okay. So as I was mentioning here, so those are all those things that Shay had just covered were common questions that you will find. So if you notice, sometimes they're kind of very similar in terms of language, like what will you do? What are you trying to achieve? Like, like there's you might run into some questions like that that can be quite similar. But again, remember what I talked about, the support resources. Sometimes there's even full out guides that funders will provide you. Guides, question by question guides on exact with more detail than the question on what it is they're looking for. So those are the things that by reaching out to the funders ahead of time, etc., making sure you're abreast to those things, those are things that you have access to. All right. So moving on. So we got through 3 stages so far. So if you remember, if you've been following, reflection, that's us looking in the mirror of the eligibility criteria, really making sure we align, right? Then we had number 2, which was the conception stage. We're coming up with our idea. We're running it by supports and other people to make sure that it's in alignment with what the grant is about. Step 3, we actually start the writing, and now so we went through the budget, we went through the work plan, we went through the questions. We understand that it's a good thing to be clear as possible. Use as many headings, as many things like numbers and letters as you can to show this kind of. They want to see method. They want to see that there's a method to how you think and how you act, and the more you show that, the better to strengthen your application. So lastly, there's the review and edit. And guys, this is just a good idea. Like when you give yourself time to actually go like work on your application and not do it in the last minute, guess what? Like you have time to get more feedback. Sometimes the very program managers that you talk to in stage 1 are available and will offer feedback right after your applications are complete. Been there, done it, where we've been able to like literally after completing an application, run it by, a program manager or someone and say, hey, what do you think about this? And they'll be like, oh, maybe you want to change this, or maybe this isn't as clear. And again, that's coming from them. So it's like, of course I'm going to make that adjustment. But you got to give yourself enough time to be able to do those things, right? So that's kind of where we're at. Leave enough time to go through the grant with someone. Keep driving it home. You guys heard my analogy with the jabs and following through, right? Clarity and precision. Keep it coming. Just keep at it. Keep driving the point home of what the grant's about. Show them that you understand this project. Show them they want to read an application and be like, wow, it was made for you. Like that's what you want them thinking. Like this opportunity was designed. When we came up with this and we sat in a room or whatever, however we came up with this, you are our person. That's how you want to approach writing grants. And so when it comes to using headers and points, as I mentioned, these are all little tips that will carry through. These are things that will help you to ultimately be able to speak a coherent, clear, precise application. think about a good application is like it's a surgeon's job. Like they have like they have the general sort of doctors that will know how to do, maybe a family doctor or whatever, and that's cool. They do good stuff. But then you need a surgeon. You need someone that can literally focus. I have a colon issue. You know what I mean? You need someone that can like literally speak to that. Like, you know what I mean? So hopefully folks are following me. Okay. Last thing to look out for, or one of the last things to look out for in some of these grants, sometimes they'll try and play tricks on you, right? And like, I call it the trick question, and it can be framed in many different ways. Is there anything else you want us to know? Or do you have any kind of support materials that you want to provide to help us better understand your project? Or, is there anything else we should consider? All different ways, different funders might pose it differently, but look for this question, you know, like I don't know if anyone here likes basketball. I like basketball. In basketball, one of the things they like to do, if anyone follows the sport, is they'll throw alley oops. You know what I mean? They'll throw lobs. So like somebody will, point guard or whatever, will come up with the ball, throw it up in the air. Okay, someone goes up, slam, right? So think of that question as a lob. Like when you see it, be like, I know the answer. The answer is always yes. There's always more. There's always something more that you can tell them about to give them some kind of detail about why they should consider you. So if you ever have an opportunity to provide something in that space, don't just leave it NA, not applicable, and just you're tired because the grant took long and you're just like, hang in there. You're almost there. You put together a great application. You've been following through the steps, right? These steps work. We use them. And so if there any, ask yourself when you see that question, say, there's definitely something else I want you to know, and think of something hard. Think of something, maybe something you wanted a little bit more words to explain, but in another question that it cut you short because of the word count. Maybe it's just as you were talking about, brother, about your skill sets, the fact that you know how to program and do stuff online that can really help you with your project, or how many connections you have in the community that are going to support because you know a lot of artists, or you know a lot of producers, or a lot of people that are whatever it is. Find something, don't lie, but find something that's true and speak to it. Because when you see that question, remember the analogy. It's like they're throwing you a lob. Like just go up there. Like go for it. You know what I mean? So remember that question. And then let's see what else we have here. We're basically through. So now we just have some grant opportunities to share. This list is not in any mean exhausting, meaning like there's others grants out there. It's like not an exhaustive list of every single grant out there. There's a lot of grants out there, but we just wanted to give you guys some pointers of where you might want to look, where you might want to do. One of the things we were doing in preparation for this workshop is I went on Google and I literally typed in Google on Google. I kid you not, I did this. Real talk. I went on Google. I typed in music grants on Google. I think I put Toronto. Music grants Toronto or Ontario. One of them I put it, right? I saw the city of Toronto pulled up a site with like 9 or 10 different resources. Some that will be on this list, some others that you can go out and look at yourself. But my point being is these opportunities are out there. People, I literally did a Google search. It took me probably all of 5 seconds to type that. And right then and there, 11, I don't know if it was 8 or 9 opportunities on one link that came up. So my point is, we want you guys to do some research as well. But it helps. It really does help and it takes some effort on your end. But hopefully this list will help you out to get you started. So Shay, you have the document, Shay? Awesome. So I'll let you do the screen share. And also, don't worry, we're going to send this out. So everyone that registered, as long as you registered or whatever, we have your emails. So we're going to actually send out all these things, the grants, the other document that had like the questions, all of this stuff that we've covered. we'll be able to send it out. You'll have access to it and you can use it. So I'll turn it over to Shay, who will kind of walk you through some of these different funding opportunities, specifically, some of them specifically for musicians, some of them she'll explain as well.
Hey everyone. Okay, so we put together this list. As you see here, the heading should help. So the first part is for ongoing deadlines. So SOCAN, they offer ongoing deadlines, and Factor as well. So there's a lot of opportunities on both of those sites. So please, please, please go through it, see what what you best align with, and go from there. A lot of the opportunities as you go through the list here, and as Joel mentioned, we'll send it to you. They're from the Ontario Arts Council and the Toronto Arts Council. So why I decided to focus on these two funders is because they have very specific grant streams. So for example, as the first one here that you see is a skills and career development grant for Indigenous arts professionals and arts professionals of color. So as you know, we service Black youth, Black people in general, Black musicians, and we want to make sure that we're finding you funding that aligns. So for sure, go on, check out this link and see what they're offering. It's a really good opportunity, I think. And if you need any support, you can also reach out to us or to the actual program manager. Yeah, so the list just goes through different opportunities with the Ontario Arts Council. You'll see the Toronto Arts Council. I put here the music program manager at TAC. I also, at the top here, put the Creative Communities Program Manager at Toronto Arts Council, and that's Kevin Ray. He is also a Black man, and he's very easy and down to earth, easy to talk to, I should say. So definitely connect with him, run your project by him, ask him for pointers, and go from there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Pretty self-explanatory list. If you have any questions after going through the list, or if you want any pointers as to where to find other grants, you can also check out artreachto.org, I think, or artreach.org. Artreach has another grant calendar that they also share. It's not necessarily specific to musicians, but it's just a general arts funding grant calendar. They also have a lot of other resources for people in community arts. And I would definitely recommend that you look through their toolkit section on their website. They teach you how to do good budgets, how to develop a board of directors, if that's the route that you want to go through. So yeah, I would definitely suggest that.
Awesome. So we'll go back to the screen share here. We're almost through. Thank you all for hanging with us. I know we're a little bit over time, but you all have been amazing. We won't keep you much longer, I promise. So as we're just wrapping this up, right? Some important tips to remember that hopefully this workshop will stay with you. So number one, be realistic. Don't overpromise. And that's why if you notice how we suggest going about doing some of these grants, is actually starting with your budgets. And that actually really does help you be realistic and your work plan in terms of, does my project and my idea and my budget align? Because when those two things are off, it's sort of the recipe for a no, you know? Uh, Details are good, very good. Like, I don't know what to say. They don't know you, they can't read your mind. So the more specific, the more details. If it's about equipment, it's like, if you can tell me the make, the model of the guitar, the year, it's pretty like, you know what I mean? Like the the registration number, like it's like the more details you have, like I'm joking about the registration number, but like you understand what I'm saying? Like the more detail, if you can provide literally, this is the instrument we want to buy, this is the mixer I need, this is the mic that's I need, this is this, whatever the case may be, right? The more specific you can be, make, model, price, tax, everything, after tax, everything, all of it. Be as
More than one
specific,
quote.
more than one quote. Yes, yes, like all of it.
Just
You
want to be
know?
that A+ student. Go for it, man.
This is this is the way to do it, you know? So we talk about the support letters and materials. Sometimes it's optional, sometimes it's mandatory. If you have the option to do it, take advantage. Remember the alley oop. Think of it as an alley oop. You're trying to set yourself apart, so things like that are definitely things that you need to do. And then stay grant ready. So what I mean by that is, you guys saw like a calendar. If you notice, you'll see when it's sent out, you'll see like there's deadlines and a calendar that lists each grant and each deadline. Create something like that for yourself so that you can keep on top of things. Like if you're like me and you depend on your Google Suite or whatever to keep you, sane with the day and all the different meetings and stuff. Literally create a calendar and call it like your grant calendar and literally go in there one day and put it all in, and you'll thank yourself because guess what? You won't miss a deadline that way. You know what I mean? And you can literally program, depending on how into hip to Google you are, you can even get it to send you a week or two or three or four or whatever your timeline is for doing the grant, send you an email so that you automatically it comes back to your memory. Because sometimes, for example, you might see something and it's like, oh, the application is due in September. Right now is February. So if you're like me, I have so much February stuff to deal with that, like, if you tell me it's September, it's like not even, like, I'm not even listening. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, if you're like me, then these things will help you because guess what? You can go in there now, you see the opportunity, put it in there now, and then maybe when it's like, what did I say when it was? April, whenever it is, or whenever it is, you like a couple weeks or whatever the notice is you want, it's like it's gonna hit you with a notice and it's like, oh yeah, shoot, I remember I had a grant, right? So these are big tips. Like staying ahead of the timelines, trust me, you're doing yourself a big favor. So be good to
And
yourself. Mm.
sorry. For the idea bank. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You're gonna thank us. If you do this, you're gonna thank us. Please do it. Please write down all your ideas in a bank that's readily available. Order yourself a pizza, get some drinks, and just eat that pizza with the ideas flowing. Get your Google Docs out, sip on your pop and your water, and just let the ideas flow. Because sometimes when you're sitting in front of a grant, you're drawing a blank and you're like, I know I thought about this already. I know I had an idea that fit this. What is it? So get your ideas flowing,
That's
please,
that's great.
for
Great
me.
advice. That's great advice. So just to piggyback on that, yeah, like the grant idea is a great idea. It's basically you're investing in yourself because the more as soon as ideas come to you, it could be for a project or something. I wonder if there's funding for this, or I wonder if there's funding for that. Don't even wait for the grant to come. Like just think of things that you want to do, and then when it comes to like now you see a grant, and remember we talked about that reflection stage. So now you can literally reflect, and you already have your idea bank, and you can look at your reflection because now you're looking at what you said it was that you really was really important to you in your idea bank. This is really the direction you wanted to go in. This is really the things you wanted to do, and then you can now look at, in addition, what the criteria is of this particular grant, and then see if there's an alignment. And if there is, then it's like you're rolling. You're already ahead of the game because you went in there and populated the document. So when you talk about standing out, preparation helps you to stand out. We talk about standing out, like preparation. Remember, there's hundreds of these sometimes. Like we did a micro grant. I think some of you all know. A couple of weeks ago, we had 8 micro grants that we could give out, and would you believe we had over 90 applications? So, and that was even within a fairly short time span. So you can only imagine how much for some of these larger agencies and who are giving out millions of dollars a year, you can only imagine how much comes in terms of applications and how much they have to see through. So in terms of standing out, securing that bag as the workshop's called, like these are the little things that I hope you will understand will really help you to shine and shine through. Lastly, I think this is our last slide. Some other tips. So take advantage of the free feedback coaching. The way I approach a grant, There's no losing. Because guess what? You just invested 10, I don't know, 15, maybe 20 hours into this thing that's called this grant application, right? Let's say you didn't get it. Brother or sister, listen, it's okay. You still have something that's you've invested a significant amount of time in and really thought through. And just because one funder said no to it doesn't mean another funder won't say yes to it. And it doesn't mean that the same funder won't say next yes to it next year, maybe even, or the next funding cycle. So there's really no lose. You only have to gain. It's that we talked about getting that bag. It's out there. Like you have nothing to lose. You only have to gain by putting the time in to put together something quality. You only have to gain. So take advantage of that free feedback and coaching. Like after, if they offer it, like feedback on what your application could have been stronger, get that, right? Sometimes you might just hear them say, honestly, your application was pretty strong, was pretty up there, but we had like a million, and like it literally came down to a coin toss because like we had 100 good ones, like, and then you can live with that. You know what I mean? And sometimes it might be like, here are real things that you should have done, and pay attention to that. Like with our first, I'll never forget our first grant. I'll tell you guys a story real quick. Our first big grant, 6-figure grant. We were like, holy. First year we applied, we went like for the max. I think you could apply for like, I don't know, two or $300,000. First year we applied, we're like, we're gonna apply for $300. At this time, we were not established, didn't have a track record, didn't have anything. So us doing that wasn't really smart because we're basically we without any kind of a track record, we're asking them to trust us with $300,000. Now, the way funders typically work is they want to see uh, a growth in terms of your management and your skill level. We pulled off a project that was small, then we pulled off something that was larger, then I did something larger. They want to see that gradual growth because that shows that you're growing as opposed to just coming out of the gate swinging. I remember the analogy, right? Like we used the boxing analogy at the beginning. Like usually if someone just comes out swinging wildly, chances are the opponent might the competition, right? The competition might say, "Oh, you're swinging wildly, no control." Okay, right? That might be a knockout for you in terms of that. You know what I mean? So going back to what I'm saying about taking advantage of the free feedback and coaching and stuff, you definitely want to do that. Remember, no's can be yeses, right? One no doesn't mean that that grant is terrible. Throw it apart, rip it up, burn it. And that's sometimes what happens is because we think we put so much time and energy into it. Oh man, I didn't get it. It's over. No, you still have, it's still your child. That's, you know what I mean? That's your baby. You worked on that. Keep that. Preserve it, build it up stronger. And maybe the next opportunity will come and it will be a yes. Shay touched on this a little bit. Back up your claims with evidence, right? Funders like this thing called evidence-based data or approaches, or you might see evidence informed or whatever. It basically means that it's more than just theory when it comes to your application. And in some cases, the truth is you may not have any internal data to offer, and that's okay. Don't make it up, right? But sometimes even looking at external sources, like a perfect example, one of the things we looked at when we conceived the idea of building the first musician community center, is we realized that a lot of the places of performance, like a lot of different places where people would perform, all these venues were closing down. And so we used data that we didn't collect, we didn't do the research on, but it was out there and readily available to us. All these restaurants, all these venues that had to close because of the industry and not being able to sustain the work. And so it showed that there was a need for what we were proposing. Again, my point is, if there's evidence there that's out there, you should be using it. Number two, we talked about this. It's really important. Number three, I guess, or four, I don't even know. I'm losing count. Play up, not down. So what do I mean? Play up, not down. They have a thing where I'm a guitarist. If I'm playing, I'm on a gig and I'm looking down all the time. That means I'm not following the band leader. I'm not following the artist. I should have my head up so that I can see what's going on. I need to be able to understand the dynamics of what's going on during that performance, right? Same thing with your with playing up. You want to play up your experience. I'm not saying to lie, but play up. If, for example, I used an example to say some people are saying, I don't think I have any professional experience. What do you mean? Hang on. Have you performed anywhere? Have you ever done a performance? Have people ever given you feedback? Have you ever had an exhibit? Okay, maybe I didn't do an exhibit where I did a live performance, but I did a show on Instagram and people came. That's professional experience. What is every artist doing right now? You understand what I'm saying? You know what I mean? So play up, not down. Remember, because again, typically, especially something I notice within our community sometimes, we can have a tendency, different cultural things, different elements. I'm not getting into it, but we do have a tendency sometimes to play down things when actually we should be playing up because what we're doing is amazing. I'm just saying. And so, lastly, work on a Google Doc so you don't lose your info. Just a last tip. Covered it, I think, already. But just one last tip. A lot of these applications, they can be a nightmare to navigate the portals and all that stuff. Work on your own document where it auto saves, or maybe you like Word or whatever and you just don't have to worry about it, because sometimes when you step into some of these Toronto Arts Council portal and this portal and that portal, you might find out that, look, their stuff doesn't just automatically save. So unless you hit save and you were in there working for an hour on your grant and then you realize, oh, I didn't hit save, all that's gone. So just learn, just trust me, man. Don't stay up all night crying. Just do yourself a favor. All right. So anyway, we had some other stuff planned, but it's 8:10. We were gonna also go through like actual budget and like work plan and stuff, but at this, I think I do feel like we've filled up the space a lot in terms of information. Um, and so what we can do, if folks are interested, we can actually send some of that stuff out if people are interested in seeing some more examples of stuff. But you all were awesome, awesome, awesome. I guess the only question I have is just, do you have any questions? Where's my slide? So summary, really quick. Don't believe the myths. Hopefully this helps to demystify grants. It's not this mysterious thing. Like, it's accessible, it's possible. I hope we gave you a real practical sense of not downplaying the competition and how precise you have to be in order to really be good at it, but to let you know that it's attainable and that it's something that can be done if you approach it right with the right focus. Number two, find out if the grant's right for you and get help. Right? Talk to people, find out if it works. If it doesn't, then maybe that's not the grant for you. Number three, stay grant ready. So, do all that reflection, do the reflections that you can, and especially when it comes to your own personal goals of what you're trying to accomplish as far as your art, as far as your music. Do all of those things so that when opportunities come, the question is, does this grant work for me, as opposed to, can I work for this grant? Because at the end of the day, if you want to sacrifice your integrity like that, you can, but it comes at a cost. It's your integrity. I wouldn't do it. That's just me. Um, and then lastly, oh, the last one's missing, but honestly, it's just driving home on all the points that we've touched on today. Staying grant ready, don't believing in the myths, finding out if the right, getting help, and also giving yourself, if I was to say a fourth point, just give yourself enough time. Like, it does take time to put something good together. Usually, as a performer or an artist, my thought is when it comes to putting out something that is unique or original, is you trust the process. You trust that it may not come just you sitting down one day saying, I'm gonna make a song. And if you trust the process, usually you'll be happier with the result, as opposed to saying, I'm just gonna write for writing's sake. Some people do that. Everyone has their own process. That's cool. But I'm just saying, like, trusting the process and being committed to the long term goal, right? So hopefully, this was cool. Thank you for joining us. You can hit us up at SoundCheck Youth on our social media if you enjoyed this. If you want more sessions like this, hit us up. We plan to do some more sessions. This is actually one of our many. We want to do some more capacity building, because one of the things I realized why I'm so passionate about this is because as a musician, I realized it's only because I had a community background that I realized that there was stuff out for me. Like even in terms of music, even community work aside, I didn't understand that there were opportunities. I'm thankful because early on, I've been working in community since I was 13. I'm literally 27 now. So I've been in community for a long time. And working in community has taught me that there's a lot of opportunities, but not everyone knows and has equal access to those opportunities. And so one of the things that's really important for us is trying to make and bring some, again, demystify, bring these bags home. Like there are bags here that belong and should, and members of our community and other communities deserve to get these funds. That's in many cases that's who these funds are trying to reach, those who are most vulnerable. And so what I will say is, definitely hit us up, follow us. We want to do some more sessions like this. If you enjoyed it, our plan and our goal is actually to post this, so hopefully that other people that couldn't be here today also have access to the knowledge. Um, Thank you all for your questions, for your engagement. I can't tell you how much I'm thankful for it because especially in these times, like with the pandemic, it's tough to do a meeting like this when you want to see that engagement, you want to hear back from people because it can be a lot to stare into space for 2 hours. You know what I mean? So anyway, any questions before we call it a night?
I definitely just want to say thank you. I think I got all my questions out the way, but I really appreciate the information. I've been to other grant writing sessions. I've heard some info, but this is like OD thorough. This is like uniquely hitting home. So yeah, thank you.
Wow,
Thank
I'm
you.
so glad. I'm so glad to hear that, man. Thank you. Thank you. This is our first one. We've never done a grant writing workshop, so I'm glad to hear that feedback. That's encouraging.
Crushed it. You guys did great.
Okay, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. All right, everyone. So without any further ado, unless anyone has any other questions, does anyone have any questions before we go? Okay. So anyway, thank you all for coming. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your patience, man. You guys have been faithful. I think it's been like 2.5 hours, man. Give yourself a clap. That's, geez. So anyway, we'll get these resources out to you all, and we just appreciate your time and everything, and hope that this was helpful. You all have a wonderful evening. Thanks for joining. Yeah, as I said, follow us, hit us up. We have programs, free programs. If you're interested in learning music, hit us up. You'll find something that works for you. Peace and love, all. Take care, everyone. All right.